Good afternoon. I called to order the regular City Council meeting for Monday, November 6th at 5:30 p.m. Please, as a reminder, just silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate to limit interruptions. Let's move on to item number 1 on the agenda, and that is roll call.
Burlingame.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Janser. Olson. Here. Pittner. Padragula.
Here.
Ross.
Here. Item number 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just as a reminder to members of the council and those who are going to be speaking tonight, just for the online stuff, if you can put your mouth or your voice a little bit closer to the microphone so they can hear online. They've been having some issues, I guess. So that would be really appreciative. Let's move on to item number 3, and that is the mayor's report. Since our last meeting, I have had a few activities. Spoke to the Washington second graders, also spoke to Sunnyside second graders, attended the Minot Commission on Aging 50th anniversary celebration. A group of us met with a delegation from Japan that is working on and eventually signed a deal with the group, the Rail Modal Group, which is operating the port out on the east side of town. We had a Project Sentinel discussion with representatives from Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Great Falls, Montana. Since our last meeting, attended a business luncheon at Minot State University. A couple of one-on-ones. Also attended a Team Minot event on the Air Force Base a couple weeks ago. Also took part, was honored to be a part of a delegation that that flew out to Vandenberg Air Force Base this last week. We hosted a number of state legislators and our commerce director for the trip to watch. They pulled a missile from one of the silos here, actually one out by Velva, and they took it out there and launched it. It went off on time, and it was quite an experience out there. Also, kind of rounding out last week, I was honored to bring home a dozen donuts with a little friendly wager I made with the mayor of West Fargo over the Minot High football game last week. So that was fun. It was a cold game, but those donuts made the trip that much sweeter. So, and congrats to the Minot High Magician football team. They'll be taking on Shanley this Friday night at the Dakota Bowl in Fargo. Just as a reminder, we do have Veterans Day coming up this weekend, so we've got a lot of things that we're proud of in this community, and one of them is that we treat our veterans really well. And Veterans Day, I don't care what you do, but do something to honor a veteran, please, as a request. Couple other things. Just an update on the Home for the Holidays. I know people have been asking how that has been going. Home for the Holidays, if you remember last year, the Air Force, they booked 4 trips. They raised enough money to send 4 airmen home for the holidays. This year, with the efforts of the community and some organizations, currently to date, we have booked 99 plane tickets for airmen to be home with their families for the holidays. So congrats and thank you to everybody who helped support that project. Finally, on my mayor's report, we do have a member of the council that is represents the city on the Visit Minot board, and I think we've got some pretty good news. So Paul, why don't you, if you can update us on some of that information.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today, the North Dakota Department of Commerce announced that the city of Minot was awarded $1 million for the Destination Development Grant that was spearheaded by Visit Minot. It was a collaborative application that was, like I said, spearheaded by Visit Minot, but included a number of different community partners and businesses. There was, 81 applications across the state. There was 14 that received funding, so Minot was lucky enough to be one of those 14. The initial amount requested was in the neighborhood of $4 million. They ended up settling on $1 million, so that will be worked out over the next 30 days to be finalized and have an agreement with the state. So again, good things that are supporting local businesses due to the hard work and diligence of Visit Minot.
And that was one of those trips where it was, one of those things that it was the quick turnaround from after the legislative session to the deadline of the grant process, so that the Visit Minot team really did a lot of work to get community partners together for that process. So congrats to everybody on that. Yes, Carrie.
Is there a designate, is this just like a general operating grant, or is there specific, I can't remember what the application was.
There were a number, I'd have to look back, 5 or 6 different components of this application. So some will receive, they'll have to reconfigure, since the initial ask was for $4 million and now it's $1 million. The numbers and the details will be settled out. Some of those activities might fall off of the application because there won't be enough funding with what was allocated, but again, those details will be, we got 30 days to iron all those out.
Great
so.
news, though.
And I think we actually had 7 local projects.
Yep.
That were funded or will receive some type of funding in this.
Yep, that's the goal.
So that's good. Are there any other questions of the mayor's report? If not, let's move on to item number 4 on the agenda, and that's the city manager's report. Harold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. First and foremost, the memo is included in the council packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any with regards to what was outlined in the memo.
Are there any questions of Harold? If not, thank you, Harold.
Yeah, no questions. I would like to invite Chief Klug up to give a brief report to the council and the public. We're undergoing an important process this week of transitioning our dispatch center from its old location to the new location downstairs. And I wanted Chief Klug to outline the timeline and answer any questions for the council.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. So thank you for those that were able to make it to the stakeholders open house last week. I think we had pretty good success with that. Just a little bit of timeline. So they did start some work today to start the transition process from the old center to the new center. Tomorrow will be the real kick in, where we have many more vendors that will be here. And over the course of Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, they'll slowly start that process of making sure all of the equipment and everything works from one center to the other. So for the next 3 days, we'll actually have dispatchers dispatching out of our old center. At the same time, we have the new center open and dispatchers working there. So we'll make sure everything is working before we actually shut the old one off and transition, but we hope that we actually have everybody here working Friday and into the weekend. So I'd take any questions you may have.
Steve.
Remind us how many calls the center processes in a year.
To date, I can't remember for the year, but to date we have over 120,000 calls.
A lot of calls, a lot of important work.
A lot of calls.
Are there any questions of
I just have
Carrie?
a comment. I just want to thank you for holding that open house last week. I think it's really important that the public, has the opportunity, if they want to come see sort of the inner workings of some things. And, once that center gets up and running, it won't be open to the public. So I know I heard from a few people who attended that they appreciated just getting to be able to visualize it.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, just to be clear, we didn't have a complete public open house, but it was for all the stakeholders that have some piece of that. So, yeah, just want to make sure that was clear.
Well, there's a picture in the paper, so it's public.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Not, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief. There's no other questions or comments for Harold. We will move on to item number 5 on the agenda, and that is the city attorney's report. Steph.
Mayor, members of the council, I've submitted a written report, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Any questions of Steph? If not, thank you, Steph. We will move on to item number 6. That is our consent agenda. On this item, we have 23 items. I've been asked to pull 6.2.11. Are there any other items to be pulled? Any other items to be pulled from the consent agenda? If not, what are the wishes of the council?
Move approval on the remaining items.
We have a motion by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross, Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 6.2.11. And Alderman Padragula, you asked that to be pulled.
Yes, I'd like to move that with an amendment. I'd like to increase the city's general contribution toward that special assessment district to 40% from 35%.
We have an amendment to the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and an amendment and a second. Further discussion. Steve?
Right. The reason I brought this back, well, there are two reasons. First is I felt that the two members who were absent last time, Paul and Lisa, should have the chance to weigh in on this. The second reason is there was a lot of public input and concern from the local residents who were affected. And I think that we all need to hear that. And I felt that the original motion to pay 35% toward it was probably reasonable, probably politically appropriate. But the more I thought about it, the more I was concerned about the precedent this is setting. And I'd like to see us weigh a little bit more on the general public good that a lighting district or something like this brings to us. You know, it's going to be, by my calculation, something like $72,000 difference spread out over, I don't know how many property owners, but it seemed a little bit more equitable. You have to pay for infrastructure to begin with, and every infrastructure has a limited lifespan. And I think once it's in there, it benefits all of us. More so, I think, residents in a given area, but there is a definite benefit to all of us. And I was struggling in my mind to think, you know, what percentage that should be. And the more I thought about it, the more that I felt something like 40% for the general good versus 60% for the local good made more sense to me. I don't think it's fair to spread it out amongst all the citizens in the community because they don't directly benefit from it. But I think the city can be a little bit more generous given the balance in that fund and the fact that nobody anticipated this, nobody planned on having to pay directly more if you live in that neighborhood for the lighting. It's kind of a common good that I think we provide to the neighborhood, and they originally paid for it when the neighborhood was developed. So 40% to me seemed like a little bit more equitable kind of allocation. I thought more on what Scott was saying and how he voted, and I think I've come to the conclusion that generally we should chip in a little bit more. I don't think that we should pay the entire cost. One precedent was the downtown area where the city, through federal funding, paid 50% of the improvements for roads and sewers and things like that. There's a broad district. We've done it different ways, but again, to me, 40% seemed like a more equitable share.
Carrie?
Well, I ideologically agree with you. And we can afford it right now. What concerns me is there's going to be a time when we can't afford to pay 40%, and this body, and it won't be us, will have to say no. We can do 30%, we can do 25%, and that, I forget what topic we were talking about probably years ago, and I just remember Paul saying we don't want to tie the hands, right, of the governing bodies that come after us. And we do sometimes with our actions. And this is like, we have the money right now to do that. And this is a relatively low cost infrastructure improvement. And, there's going to be ones that are quadrupled as price, right? And 40% is going to be much, much more. And, I'm willing to say no in the future, right? If we don't have the money, we don't have the money. So I think I'm going to support it. I mean, I supported, we started at 0, I got us to 30, I got us to 35, so
That's very political of you.
happy to get us to 40, but I think that's as high as I would feel comfortable with the city contributing. So thank you for that amendment, Steve.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Lisa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do appreciate the fact that I will get the opportunity to vote on this as well. Alderman Pittner, I did go back and watch the video from that meeting, so I feel like I have a good sense of what the neighborhood wanted. And I don't know
that they're wanting us to pay an extra 5%. My sense was, and certainly any of you who were here can correct me, but I kind of got the sense that it was all or nothing. And so I don't know if 5% is going to make a difference. So I'd be looking for more information related to that if I have incorrect information.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I wasn't able to attend. I was able to watch the video and obviously a very heated meeting. And again, that's to echo some of Carrie's statement that this is a precedent that's being set. And then there's no one size fits all for these projects. When sidewalks have to be replaced in front of someone's house, they replace them, they're assessed for them, even though I walk on them, even though my kids ride their bikes on them. So again, there's no right or wrong answer in this. I don't believe that anybody can be upset with anybody for wanting to pay all of it or pay none of it. My concern does come with the precedent being set. Personally, I would like to see it go back down to 25, just because I think it ties the hands, like Carrie had stated, of future bodies, and it sets a precedent for some of these infrastructure improvements or repairs that need to be made, these maintenance things that need to be made going in the future. So again, I don't think I'll support the amendment, but I do appreciate the work that was done to get to the 35%, and I think I can support that. But again, it's a slippery slope. Where does it stop? When you start to pay for things going forward, and you know, we hear the concerns of citizens as a whole, and that's we are an at large council. We don't represent just a neighborhood. We don't, and we saw that when it was when we had districts. We had people come in and advocate for their neighborhood and what was best for their neighborhood. And I think it's beneficial to this council to be out of that purview and be in the at large to look what's best for the community as a whole. And that's where I feel I will vote with my vote as to what's best for the community moving forward. And I think it's to make sure we spread the cost as much as we can across the city, but when neighborhoods are benefiting, we also, they have some skin in the game. So I think I'll look to maintain it at the 35% that the council set at the previous meeting.
Mark, did you have comments?
I'm going to kind of echo what Paul said. I remember when I moved into the house I live in, which was kind of a stretch because you know, we had a much bigger house payment than we had previously. One day in the mail, you know, I get a letter that the neighborhood is getting streetlights, and there's a special assessment of X amount of dollars a month. I don't remember what it was, but you know, it was something we felt we just had to figure out a way to do because we're part of that neighborhood. I don't feel I'm, and I expect when our streetlights have to be replaced, it'll probably be the same kind of situation again. I don't think that I want to be part of changing the precedent or setting a different precedent that all of the folks in the past who have gotten benefits when some special was installed have paid for, and now we would decide we're going to pay more going forward. I don't see the rationale for that, so I can't support this amendment.
Scott?
I guess I'll kind of add in, first off, nobody has said anything up here that's incorrect. It's one of those opportunities where there is right answers on both sides of the issue. And as I said last week, I would actually have preferred to have set the precedent or used the precedent of 50%. And the reason I did that is in part because that's just how I feel about specials. I think there's legitimate arguments to be made for the fact that there is shared usage of these, and then there's individual usage and individual benefit of things like streetlights or sidewalks or everything else that we can talk about. I also think it is important to recognize and pay heed to the fact that we are living in a tough period of time right now where there is a shortage of money and you know, unprecedented amounts of inflation and all those kind of things that are just making life really hard on a whole lot of people. And if we can make a little bit of a difference right now, I think there is benefit in doing that. Can we promise it tomorrow? Of course not. But we can't promise anything tomorrow. We never know what tomorrow's budget is going to mean. But right now, I think we can make a difference, and I'll be voting in support of this tonight.
Steve, just a question. Talk about, do you have any concerns over the precedent that could be being set by moving it to 40%?
Yes, I do. As I said before, I think the people who primarily benefit should pay the primary expense. And in my own mind, I've thought about this, over and over again, and somewhere between, 60 and 80% funding for the people who primarily benefit seems reasonable. As Scott was saying, I think times are tough. We happen to have a little bit of money for this. As Carrie said, and as Scott said too, we can't predict what the future will bring. I guess my thought would be that for new improvements, they're on you. But after a while, they become part of the fabric of the community and we all benefit. And the question to me is, to what extent do we benefit and to what extent should we pay? To some extent, 60% is arbitrary. It could easily be 70. I think when you get around the 50 range, that's spreading it too greatly. And I think that's, those of us who aren't there won't get as much benefit. I think that I would suggest that be a general guideline, not a precedent that binds us forever, which it wouldn't, but generally we'd be looking at, in terms of infrastructure repair, something like that. And I know that historically what we've done with things like sewers and road upkeep, we've tried to spread those districts out quite a bit to make sure that anybody who benefits even tangentially pays something to ease the burden on everybody. And most projects do affect a larger neighborhood. They don't affect just one block or one street. So I don't see it as binding us unnecessarily. I think that would be something in terms of replacement that we might kind of aim at. And if we come close, that's good enough for me. I was hesitating to even bring up the changing it from 35 to 45, but I just felt more comfortable with spreading the burden out a little bit.
Did you say 45 or 40?
No, 40%, I'm sorry.
40%.
From 35 to 40. It turns out, if my math is right, about $72,000, which probably wouldn't be a whole lot for each property owner. But, times are tough, and if they can put a few more dollars in their own pocket, I think that would be to their good.
Thank you, Steve.
Not a big deal, but that seemed like the more I thought about and slept on, the more it seemed like a better allocation.
Any other questions or comments? If not, please call the roll.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
No.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
No.
Olson. No. Bittner.
No.
Motion fails.
The amendment fails. Now we still have to vote on the
I'll move the main
the
motion
second
then.
reading. What's that?
I'll move the main motion then.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Paul, we have a motion by Steve and a second by Paul. Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson. Yes. Bittner.
That covers our consent agenda. Moving on to our action items. Item 7.1, reject rebid for wayfinding Phase 1 and revise priority. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Second.
A motion by Paul, second by Carrie. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Mark?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a concern about this, and I guess that because of the way this has turned out, in the expense being almost double, and then on a rebid, they only reduced the bid by about $20,000. I'm wondering where we're going to end up in revising the priority. I guess I'd like to hear the rationale for the revised priority that we end up with. Somebody can speak to that.
We have Mr. Rosenthal, as well as our traffic engineer here, who's been helping work with the project. They can answer any questions the council has with this matter.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Janser. We haven't determined that at this point. We had an obligation to bring it forward when we felt it wasn't adequate covered. One alternative sometimes is to come in and ask for more money, and we are not doing that. So we want to take a look at, live within the budget that's been set. It's a 3-year plan, 3-year budget, and take a look at what might be cut out, just be given less priority. And maybe it gets picked up at a later date, but we haven't determined what that is, and we would bring it back to you.
Okay, I'm a little confused because in the memo, it clearly identifies what the revised priority is, and it looks to me like that's what we're approving. So which way is it, please?
I apologize. We were doing this at the last minute, and actually, it was written by Stefan.
Mayor Alderman Janser. So to get back to your original question, I guess, revising the priority, I think what our plan is, and it's written as an alternative in the memo too, if you want to change it, is to, instead of doing the primary destination signs that came in expensive twice, to switch to more of the downtown and entryway. So the downtown arch structure and the entryway monuments outside of town, address those first. That was originally, you could say, phase 2, 2024. So our plan was to address those in 24 first rather than keep rebidding phase 1. And then reevaluate funds at a later point to see how we can fit in items at phase that are identified as phase 1, which are your traditional wayfinding, your primary destination, secondary destination, and with that, probably a reduced scope too to make that fit within budget.
Can I follow?
Hang on
I think
a
I'm
second.
with you. So,
Were you-
okay, I'm
Mark,
confused
were-
now too.
Hang on one second. Were you finished, Mark?
Well, I guess I would just, in response to that, I guess I would just say, it seems to me like, if I remember right, that like the arches were in a later phase in the original, they were in the second phase?
Phase 2.
Phase 2, okay. And so moving them up to, the first year, which would be next year, and then the entry monuments are those at each kind of highway entrance into town, correct?
They're the stone marble structures that are on the borders of town, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess the concern that I have is if this is a wayfinding project, doing those two elements first don't necessarily do any wayfinding. I mean, we have monuments out on the edge of town now. The arches will be downtown, but, unless you go see it, it doesn't help you get there. So I guess I just had some concerns and questions about that reprioritization part.
I'll get it right this time. Mayor Ross, Councilman Janser. In terms of wayfinding does include finding your way, directing people, but it also says you're here, and it's part of placemaking. So I think this was done by committee over a number of months last year. We've just tried to cut our coat to fit our cloth, I guess, but it is. We saw the priority when this was originally conceived several years ago, even before I got here. It was really a downtown-oriented project. And what we tried to do when we were looking at this as a committee over the last year was to take a look and make this more citywide and to entail all the things going on in the community. So those monument signs are kind of, you're here in Minot. They're pretty important signs. However, they were designed in a way that makes them difficult to read. Essentially, if you take a silver sign and have a gray stone background behind it, they're difficult to see. And as I'm driving with people coming into town at night or with other people, most people, I say, what do you think of that sign? And most people are saying, yeah, that's not an easy to read sign. And they will incorporate the one brand colors, the 5 colors and spruce up those signs. So I think we just, as a committee, we had people from the Chamber of Commerce, we had people from tourism, all of us sitting down over a period of time, decided those were important. We've rejiggered this a little bit based on the money that we had available, took some out, but for the most part, those priorities remained from what were determined last year.
But,
Okay, so it's kind of morphed from being a wayfinding to a placemaking kind of approach?
Well,
or
they're
view?
oh, excuse me.
Is that a fair statement or way out of line?
Mayor Ross, Councilman Janser, Alderman Janser. I wouldn't say it's morphed. I would just say they're part of the same thing. Nothing has changed in terms of how we presented it last year and brought it forward when it went into the CIP. Just what we haven't changed really much of anything other than cutting some out in order to make it fit the budget. I don't think that it's morphed from what we had presented. We haven't changed that.
Carrie?
I have a lot. So I'm sort of with Mark, right? So how much, and I'm not asking to reprioritize, but it seems like the primary destination and secondary destination are more sort of wayfinding, right? Those are like, remind me, primary would be like auditorium, helping people navigate like the big major primary destinations in Minot, correct?
Yes.
So I'm just curious what the rationale was, given limited resources, why like the 2 priorities for the downtown gateway arches and the updated entry monuments were put before perhaps the signage that like the primary destination that would benefit tourists and visitors and new residents more than having a gateway arch or an entry monument. Why was that prioritized?
Well, again, excuse me, Mayor Ross, Alderman Evans. This is as we haven't changed anything that we presented to you last year. Just saying that. If you're asking me to go back to how we had done this, simply to say it was spread out over 3 years. You're in fairly short period of time. You're doing it. I get the point that you're making, that it could have all been pushed into, if the priority was, this is directional finding. Yeah, we could have done it that way. It was simply, we worked from, I would say the way it's done is we worked from the outside to the inside being downtown. And we put downtown last for the most part, and said we're going to work at the perimeter and again, work toward the center of downtown. And we just took pieces that seemed to make sense in terms of how many, just breaking it up into pieces that could kind of be broken up into three pieces. Yeah, it could have been done a little differently.
So we reject the bid, and then what is still happening now? Are the number 1 and 2 priorities happening? Okay, the bid came in too high, we're going to reject that. I mean, that's what the motion is on the table.
Yes.
So what happens next then?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Evans, the I'm not used to this approach, even after these 3 years. It's got to go to bid again, and it goes with a smaller number of projects. It's redone, and it goes out again. And then come January, then we can bid on the second portion. We at this point feel that we need to get some new numbers. One of the things that happened that put us in the situation that our numbers weren't estimated quite as well as they might have been is that DOT had made some changes. And when this was put out, they were making changes well after the budget was set last year. And we had to respond to some changes that DOT made, requirements that they had.
So the new rebid will go out just for number 1 and 2 then?
Separately.
Separately. So is it expected that the downtown gateway arches will come in within that 232, or both are going to come in at 232? What is the ideal here?
Mayor Ross, Councilwoman Evans, the gateways are actually in the second bid, so they wouldn't be within that number. There would be two sets of numbers.
But the gateway is number 1 priority, it says in here. Wouldn't that be the first thing? So it says downtown gateway archers are priority number 1, and the updated entry monuments are priority number 2.
Yeah.
So are we going out for a bid just for priority number 1 right now, if we reject this? I'm sorry, this is like, I'm just like trying to figure.
Can we step back a couple items here?
We can step back as far as you like.
So our recommended action was to, I guess, approve the revised priority list.
Right.
As an alternative, council can change that priority list. We can go back to the original, we can keep what we recommended, or we could, do some sort of modification. You see how you have the power to kind of dictate us what we want to go out to bid for. To just the funding deal, I can't give you a good answer on the estimate for the downtown archway structure. That still needs to be designed. I'm not a structural engineer, but I can come back and give you an estimate for that.
I'm just wondering, so what, we reject this, we have $232,000 in the budget for this year. What are we asking the company to come and bid in on? Just the gateway arches?
So
What are we sending out for bid?
Right now,
Yeah.
if we reject this bid,
Yep.
we are not going to rebid right at the moment.
Oh, okay, we're gonna hold.
We're going to hold
Okay.
off. This is our recommendation, our plan.
Okay,
Hold off on rebidding I'm going to say, primary and secondary destination signage. We're going to switch gears and try to do the downtown gateway arches, updated entry monuments, using the funding for, you could say, year 1 and year 2, reevaluate funding available at the end of that, and try to go back and start addressing the primary destinations in year 3 as well, finish that primary and secondary.
but we don't have a successful bid for the downtown gateway arches or the highway monuments right now.
We do not.
So we have to rebid those, correct?
We have not bid those at all.
But, we have to bid those out because we are changing around the priority.
Correct.
Got it, okay. And then if for some reason if we end the budget year and we haven't successfully done that, that money will roll over, so you guys can have that in the 2024 process, correct?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. That'll go to reserves, and we could do a budget.
Okay,
amendment
I just
from
want to
there.
make sure, so
Okay.
you're not under pressure, right, or we're not under pressure to accept something, so. Okay, I think I have a little bit of clarity. Thank you.
Mark?
Okay, the current motion is that we approve the recommendation, correct? I'd like to
Correct.
I'd like to amend that motion that we reject the bids and that we ask staff to relook at the priority list and include estimates of what each element is likely to cost, so that we can make a better determination. Because it looks to me like we're carrying over $232,000 from FY '23, and we have $582,000 total then with the 350 that's in '24.
Mark, can I get a second? That sounds
I'll
like you're
second.
kind of stepping into the discussion.
Okay.
Did you get it, Steve? You
Yes.
second? Thank you. So go ahead.
Well, and so, in order to, I guess for me, in order to approve a priority list, I need to kind of know what a realistic estimate is for what those elements are. Because if 2 gateway arches is going to cost us $500,000, then we're done for '24. So I think we need to know what we're getting ourselves into. Obviously, the previous estimates for the things that we've already bid twice, and I get it, prices have gone up. These were probably done 2 years ago when the study is done and all of that. But I mean, I think in order to approve this revised list and have it moving forward, I think we need those numbers, or at least some kind of numbers.
I just have a clarifying question. Would Ackerman Asphalt have to redo the plans and specifications to do that? And if so, do we need to allot funds to do that?
They are already under contract to do the
Okay.
design for that.
Okay.
I would say it hasn't been done yet, but I would assumption here, hopefully it doesn't make me, but I believe we can get a rough estimate for that structure.
Okay, I just wanted to make
So
sure we weren't telling you to
could
do something
come
and not
back,
giving you the.
Try to come back next meeting with a revised priority list with a cost estimate attached to that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Steve?
Yeah, I think we do need to get some specific estimates for each of them and do some mixing and matching like Mark was saying. I'll just be very frank again, I can't support the gateway arches, and I think they would consume way, way too much of the overall budget. I'd rather get 3 or 4 of the other things moving. Frankly, the more I think about this, to me, number one priority, I know it's last on your list, would be the downtown parking. I mean, not to be crass about this, we own those parking ramps, we want them used. If people can't find them, how are they going to use them? How are we going to generate a revenue stream? So to me, and a couple signs on each of the parking ramps would be very cheap in comparison to a $250,000 gateway arch. So to me, I think it's really important that we have a priority breakdown and maybe rejuggle that. I know the others might favor the gateway arches, but like I say, I just can't go with that. But I think something like the parking ramp identification would be much more important and much more remunerative in the short run. If we have a limited amount of money, it makes sense to try to generate more money through our expenditures. So I
Will
would,
help us. I think once we get the
Right.
rough cost back, we can see if that's a
Right.
relatively small thing,
Right.
let's
Do it.
get it out of the way, right?
Scott?
First off, just for the public at home and for everybody, what is the funding source for this project again?
This is coming from your sales tax, economic development funds.
Okay, so it's economic development sales tax funds, an important part. One of the things that I'm wondering is can we, so we look at what was originally the first priority, the primary destination, secondary destination, and highway signage. Can we look at scaling that into 2 different years or something? Can we, I agree a little bit with what Alderman Patagula said. I want to, money's not unlimited, so therefore if we only have we don't have enough money to do everything on this project, I want to prioritize what's most important. And I would say that the downtown gateway arches would be at the low end of my priority, so I'd hate to fund that first, knowing that we don't know how much money is going to exist in year 2 or 3 of this. I would also say that if we have to rescale that, the bid that went out now in order to meet the costs or the amount of money that we have now, I would like to have that as an option on the table as well.
Thank you. If I may, Mr.
Can the
Mayor.
clerk read?
Go ahead.
Oh,
I guess my question is so we've already bid this twice. So we do know the numbers of some phases of this, right? Because those are the numbers that we've gotten back twice now, right? And I assume that those were your primary destination, secondary destination, and highway signage projects? Okay, so we have those numbers in front of us because we bid them twice. The challenge is that those have come in over what we budgeted. We budgeted $232,000 in this fiscal year. Bids came back at $367,000. So, but we've also already budgeted $350,000 in 2024. I guess I would share the concerns of the council of, I think the primary destination and secondary destination and highway signage are kind of your core element of wayfinding signage of the community. And I'd rather try to find a way of getting those done first before we start doing phase 2 or 3 that don't have as much impact or value without the remaining wayfinding signage in place. And I guess my other question would be is, if the council chooses not to reject these bids tonight, how long are those bids good for? And then my question would be to the finance director is, since the council's already approved the 2024 budget, what is the ability of finding a way of using some of next year's funding to move this contract forward so we can do the numbers that we already know we have in place and not risk having that be more expensive when we bid that out in 12 to 18 months? And at least getting that first phase done, and then later on in future budgets, figure out how we do other future phases of the wayfinding signage program after these core pieces are in place. I guess that's my thinking at this time. I appreciate the efforts the staff has done to try and keep this within budget, but I think keeping a logical approach to this is important as well.
So I guess question is, how long is the bid good for?
It says at the bottom of the memo at 60 days,
Okay.
actions required within 60 days of the bid opening. I don't know if that's,
So those bids were received when, and so they have how much time left available on them? How long has staff been working through the numbers and stuff before we brought it to council from receipt of the bids? Well, the dates are here, right? October 11th, the rebid was open. So the end of this week, it'll have already completed 30 days, so there still should be another 30 days available. So if council wanted to potentially table this item and take it up again in December, those bids would still be in effect.
However, I'm concerned we may reprioritize, right? And if that's the case, then the existing bids aren't going to be, for what we're reprioritizing. Like, we're sort of in this, like, we're asking them to come back in 2 weeks with sort of a rough cost for each of the items to see if they're, if we can, fund based on the priorities you all have set, or if if there's going to be a larger discussion on what those priorities should be. I'd be really hesitant to overturn the work of the committee that has worked hard on these priorities. So certainly, I think if you guys can have some additional members of the committee here at the next meeting just to discuss that might be helpful. So I don't know. Yeah, the bids are coming in high, but like that was for, priorities that we may not have in 2 weeks, right? Like, so I'm going to hold out. I'm going to wait for, I'm going to support Alderman Janser's, amendment to reject the bid and direct staff to come back with some rough estimates. So, quickly, so that we would still have 2 weeks, I guess, for that bid to still be good, but.
We have the finance director there. I just wanted to ask Dave a question that kind of piggybacking off of what Harold asked. Is it possible to get some of those funds from next year, roll it back into this year to meet this bid?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that is possible. It would require a budget amendment to make the funds available so we can sign the contract in the current year. Most likely those funds wouldn't be expended until 2024 anyway, but it is possible, and it does require 2 readings for that budget amendment.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, as long as Dave's up there, I wanted to ask, I'm a little confused here. In terms of the fiscal impact, it says in one column, existing impact for this year, 232,000. Then it says proposed funding, 0. What money do we have in there? Is it 0 or is it 232?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padagula, my understanding is that they were just shifting the funding that was allocated in 2023 into a future period and reorganizing the project to fit into the budget constraints. But they would have the 2023 funding as well as the 2024 funding available to take on a bigger part of the project in 2024.
Okay, so 23 is not spending anything and we're carrying over that amount.
That's right.
That's my understanding.
Thank you,
correct?
that's what I thought. If I could, one more thing. What was that one more thing? When staff comes back with preliminary cost estimates, I really would appreciate if we could have just a short descriptive paragraph or a couple sentences as to what each of these things are. It's been so long since this first came to the council. I don't know what secondary versus primary destination is anymore, to be honest with you. Just give us a brief summary of what those things are. I know what the gateway arches are. I know what updated monuments are. Beyond that, I'm a little fuzzy. And that would really help me with the prioritization
And not
process.
necessarily making them do work, but maybe just reattaching, right, the memo
That's
they
fine.
did for
Yeah,
us.
that's fine.
Like, the one that we got presented last year, I thought was very good, so there's
Just
no.
find it and
There's
send
no
it.
need reinventing the wheel, just make sure that's on next meeting's agenda,
Right.
and we'll review it.
Mr. Mayor,
Lisa?
would it be possible to separate out this motion and to leave the denial of the bid on the table and then just take action on the second part of your amendment, Alderman Janser, so that we would be giving staff direction, but we would still stay within that 60-day time parameter so that we're not rejecting a bid, we're just not taking any action on it at all tonight.
If I may.
Go ahead,
That would be my concern too. If you reject the bids officially tonight, the contractor is no longer required to honor those prices. And so if you come back and you reaffirm the priorities previously that we're going to focus on was originally the first priorities being the primary destination, secondary destination, and highway signage, which we've already bid twice now. And then you reestablish those as the priorities again, and we go out and rebid those. The contractor has no obligation to maintain the prices that they just gave you that we bid for the second time. So that's my concern about the council rejecting the bids versus at least holding off a little bit longer if you've got the time to do that.
Mark?
I would be happy to make a substitute motion that doesn't reject the bids, but that brings this item back at our next meeting with the requested additional information that's been discussed from the staff.
And
Are
I'll
you
second that
essentially
change.
tabling the motion? Tabling this action until the next
That could be
meeting?
done too. We could,
Well, I would withdraw, he can withdraw his
Hey.
first motion.
Can he withdraw?
Withdraw your motion.
okay, I'll do that.
Unless there's any objection.
And I'll go with it.
Okay, so the motion's been withdrawn, and we're back to the original action item and the recommendation. So are we looking for a motion to table until the next meeting or postpone?
I would move that.
I'll second. So we have a motion to postpone to the next meeting, and we have a second. Is there any discussion? None? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 7.2, Transfer Me LLC Taxi Cab Service License. What are the recommendations of the council?
Move approval.
Got a motion by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Any discussion? Carrie?
Chief Klug, can you come up for a question? So consistent with our city ordinances, there is a requirement for any licensee under this division to have at least one operable, accessible vehicle in its fleet. An accessible vehicle is defined as including a ramp and other feature to allow wheelchair user to board safely and independently. Does the license, does Beeline Service have in the proposed fleet an accessible vehicle?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, initially they did not, but I pointed out the ordinance and they have a van online that meets the requirements of the ordinance.
Thank you for pointing that out to them.
Any further discussion? Scott?
I just want to point out that I'm extraordinarily happy to be voting yes on this. I think that this has been something our city has needed, and especially the accessible after-hours transportation. has been needed, and I'm glad to say that Minot's going to have this service again. I'd like to welcome this company to our community.
Thank you, Scott. Any further discussion? Harold?
I can just point out, typically these would be handled administratively and not have to come back to council, but as is outlined in the memo, this company is based out of Williston, and ordinance requires that anyone operating a taxi service in the city limits of Minot has to have inspections performed by a council-approved inspector within the city limits. And these inspections were done of a inspection service in Williston, which is why it came to council this evening and created some of the challenge and the delay here with regards to this. And I don't know if at some future point, if council wants to revisit that requirement in ordinance, whether that's still needed or not. But I just wanted to point that out for sake of the public and for the council again.
Thank you, Harold. Anything further? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner? Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Moving on to item 7.3, ordinance amending the tobacco fees. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Got a motion by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Moving on to item 7.4 on the agenda, that's the appointment of the Assistant City Manager position. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Discussion.
Can you tell us
Carrie.
a little about this guy?
I can. We had a great pool of candidates, including one internal candidate. The internal candidate and this candidate were pretty neck and neck. We had good positive feedback from the two panels and the recruiting firm on both of them. Ultimately, the individual recommended, he's a retired Air Force colonel, 28 years in the United States Air Force. Including his primary job being providing support services on the base. So in essence, making sure all the infrastructure and security services and all those kinds of things were in place and responding as needed. Since retiring from the Air Force, he's been serving as Deputy Installation Commander for the Army Corps of Engineers, which given that this position will have a lot of responsibility over public works and the flood control and those kinds of things, having experience in working with the Army Corps of Engineers, the experience working with federal departments and those kinds of things, the leadership training available. Interviewed really well, had high marks from, again, the interview panels and those that participated in the group. And ultimately, I think he's a good fit for our needs currently. It's hard to say and predict how long an individual like this will be around. They do have aspirations of eventually being a city manager at some point in the future. I go into it with the decision of if I can get 3 to 5 years from this individual and do some internal assessments and keep some of these projects moving forward, use Tom's leadership experience and training to further mentor and develop employees within our organization. That will be 3 to 5 years well spent and invested, and we can look at it again later on down the road at that point.
Carrie?
Follow-up reminder. Since this is a new position we've created in the budget, remind us again, like what your vision is for this person and some of the portfolio they will take on.
Yeah, so in the reorganization that we talked about previously, we divided Public Works into 2 new departments, a Public Works Department and Utilities Department. And then this, right now, given the skill sets of Mr. Joyce, the Utilities Department, the Public Works Department, and the Engineering Department would report to him. He would be tasked with trying to find efficiencies between those 3 departments and come forward with some recommendations on how we can provide better services, hopefully if possible with lower cost, with regards to that. I have not made the determination yet on whether some other departments would potentially be put underneath the assistant city manager. I want them to get in and get onboarded, continue to assess the reorganization that we've done and whether or not we need to do anything further with regards to that. But given his skill sets, there are some other potential departments that could potentially go under his supervision later on down the road once he gets up to speed on NAWS and flood control and the reorganization of the department. Other departments for consideration in the future would be the community development department, and then also potentially maybe even the airport later on down the road, given his experience working for the United States Air Force and supporting airport services for some period of time. But the key things are those three departments are the main priority and focus right now, and make sure that we're hitting on all cylinders with regards to that, and whether or not there's any efficiencies that can be gained, particularly developing our employees through leadership training and those kinds of things through our management team over there. And if there's time left in his schedule to take on more, then those are the other two departments that would be in consideration later on down the road.
And part of the thinking of council and you in creating this position was because those three departments, we have NAWS and flood control as sort of the two biggest things the city is working on, is having a person sort of in the executive part of City Hall who is, making sure those huge projects that this community has made huge investments in, and the governments of, our federal government and state governments have, he will be the point person too in making sure all of that is still, the train is still on the tracks.
He will, in partnership with our current staff,
Sure.
with our utilities director, our city engineer, and this individual will also have to make the decision on who's going to take the new public works director role as it's restructured. So that'll be another key piece. But then helping us make sure that we're keeping consistent with the plan that's already been established, help us overcome any challenges or objectives that come up in the execution of that. But two is to do analysis of those departments to make sure that we're operating as efficiently, as effectively as we can.
Thank you, Harold.
Steve?
Just to add more, I think, for the benefit of the public, the rationale to repeat that for hiring this person. It's a very responsible and highly paid position. And I think part of the reason for wanting that higher level of horsepower and more horsepower, frankly, is because of the magnitude of the public works-like projects we're undertaking. Harold's commented that we have NAWS to finish. That'll probably hopefully be done within 2 years. Then we'll have to operate it and work in conjunction with the other communities. We're also facing the struggle, the seemingly endless struggle to complete our flood control project, which is at $1 billion or probably more and will last for many years, maybe a decade, if not longer. So we're going to need a lot of time and a lot of expertise there. And then just the unfunded, unmet, deferred maintenance that we have. The last estimate the city engineer gave us was over $600 million. Now, I don't mean to imply that we've been negligent in any fashion. I doubt there's a single city in the United States which is caught up on deferred maintenance and infrastructure. But I think everybody understands that our infrastructure throughout the country is not doing well, and we need to think creatively and work efficiently to try to bring it up to snuff. But we're talking about, close to $2 billion worth of investments. We have hundreds of staff involved in those areas. We have projects that affect the whole community and the whole region, projects that will be very long-lasting. And from my perspective, that those responsibilities and the magnitude of the expenditures we'll be undertaking and the length of time all these things will take more than justify bringing in an assistant city manager. So I think his plate will be very, very full very quickly. And I think part of the challenge will be to see how we can most creatively use his resources and the talents of this particular individual, and also get going with some of the other things we've talked about at our retreat meetings, like improved leadership training. I also would point out that in our citizen survey, public works type, and that I mean that broadly, including roads and things like that, were the greatest area of concern for our citizens. They wanted quality improved in those areas. So the only way to do that is to allocate resources, personnel resources and financial resources. So citizens are telling us both individually when they talk with us and also in terms of formal systematic scientific polling that this is what they want us to concentrate on. So that's the rationale for this position.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments, questions? If nothing, please call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 7.5, the PFAS multi-district litigation proceeding. What are the wishes of the council?
I'll make a motion to move the council opt out of the MDL cases and direct the mayor and city staff to take all action necessary to complete this directive.
Second.
Motion by Carrie, second by Paul. Is there any further discussion? Steve?
I wanted to ask our city attorney why she's recommending opting out. And I also read something, I'm a little confused, that we did not find, at least under preliminary testing, any of these substances in our water. And yet these firms are wanting us to sue somebody because supposedly we've suffered some harm. And how could we have suffered some harm if there isn't any of this stuff in our water? So if you could clarify those things, I'd appreciate it.
So our recommendation to opt out has come after having numerous discussions with other city attorneys across the state.
Can you speak a little bit closer to your mic? Thank you.
Yep, so Mayor, Alderman Padrigula, and City Council. So our recommendation is coming after having just had discussions with other city attorneys across the state as to what their councils are planning on doing. Bismarck's already opted out. City of Grand Forks has this on their agenda today with a staff recommendation to opt out. And in conversations with Fargo staff, my understanding is they're planning on also recommending on opting out of this litigation. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with your evaluation of it. We think it's too early at this particular stage with the testing results that we're having reported from our various water departments. We're not seeing a widespread PFAS contamination. That would make sense for us to participate in this litigation at this time. So the multi-district litigation is unique in that we have to proactively opt out of that. And the window that we have to opt out is lightning fast in terms of litigation. It's only 60 days. So we have to opt out by the beginning of December. And that window, in our opinion, is just too small in order for us to adequately be able to characterize our claims to an amount where we'd be happy with submitting those to litigation and have those be the final determination of our claims for any PFAS remediation. So that's where our recommendation is to opt out at this particular time.
So am I understanding you correctly that we just don't know at this point if we would qualify and would be legitimate to join a lawsuit if we have suffered some damages?
They're telling us that we would qualify, but in order to submit claims, we would have to be able to prove our damages. And at this particular time, we're not seeing enough trace amounts of PFAS in our water supply is what's being reported to me in order to be able to adequately characterize that and file that claim.
The threshold for joining must be very low then.
What they did is they split up cities into phases that qualify, and the city of Minot lands in phase 1 in terms of qualifying. My understanding is that in determining who qualifies, they look at several factors, and included in those factors are, do you have a public water system? Proximity to an Air Force base? Do you own a airport? These are all things that our city provides to its residences.
So superficially, in terms of hoops to jump through, we've jumped through them and we would meet the criteria, but it's not clear that there really has been any substantial contamination and that could in good faith join the suit.
We could in good faith join the suit, but we would have to
Can demonstrate our damages.
We'd have to proactively take some more steps in order to demonstrate our damages and what those would be. And at this point, we don't have demonstrable damages that city staff has reported to me that we would submit in this particular action.
So we might, but we just can't prove it.
At this particular point, we don't have that information in front of us. It seems like it's not ripe at this time for us to submit that particular claim.
That explains it well. Thank you.
And just to clarify, opting out of the settlement does not prohibit our ability to take further legal action in the future should there be demonstrable evidence to the contrary.
Yes.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments? If not, please call the roll.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Padrigula, Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame.
Yes.
Moving on the agenda is item number 8, and that is personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for anybody who wishes to address the council to come up and limit your comments to approximately 5 minutes. So if there's anybody who wishes to speak to the council, please approach.
Hello, my name is Billy Gunderson. I'm a resident in downtown Minot. As my first appearance, I'm not familiar with the procedures. Mayor Tom Ross, Alderman, I sent an email to City Council, Alderwoman, Alderman, and the Mayor October 19th, addressing the Downtown Facade Improvement Program, addressing my concerns on ADA accessibility, with a focus on why I do not see any ADA push buttons on any of the downtown businesses, new or existing, with the exception of the businesses that had wave door openers provided during COVID by grants by the state. I received a response back from Alderwoman Carrie Evans, Alderman Stephen Pedregula, and Mark Janser, 3 of the 7. I'm concerned that the program is not operating as it's written. There isn't a focus on ADA accessibility, with my concerns that when conversations were had with business owners, that conversation on ADA accessibility as one of the components to the program were halted, as well as safety concerns. In the email, I challenged 7 of the 7, including the Renaissance Zone Revenue or Review Board, to rent wheelchairs to navigate downtown and City Hall to understand the challenges, or to accompany me as I navigate downtown for me to communicate as they witness the obstacles that I face. Of the 3 that did respond, none accepted. I have responses back from Carrie Evans, Stephen, and Mark Janser. Carrie appreciated the invite. She was sympathetic and understanding, having, having had a wheelchair and navigated with her own issues. She asked that, or challenged me to go beyond asking us, the council, to experience downtown in a wheelchair and request specific realistic proposals for the governing body to consider. Mark Pedregula, Alderman, he said that there was a lot to take in from my email. There absolutely was a lot. There are a lot of concerns that I have. He said that he had spoken with Jonathan Rosenthal regarding the facade program, both past and present. He said that he was also going to speak with staff about the accessibility in the bathrooms. I got a very detailed email back from Alderman Pedregula, also sympathetic to my concerns and understanding of the need for ADA accessibility and his disappointment that ADA push buttons were not a requirement. He asked that I be patient with City Council addressing these issues. My concern is also not just that the possibility that ADA push buttons may be installed as a fix to my concerns, but my concern is also the attitude about ADA accessibility and why they weren't installed and what this means for me being disabled and others as well, and how the city is going to move forward. I sent another email addressing realistic proposals for ADA accessibility. I did not receive a response from any of the council members or Mayor Tom Ross. That was in response to Carrie Evans challenging me to send out a proposal. At the roundtable on issues impacting the disabled on October 18th, I addressed the north entrance of City Hall not meeting ADA minimum requirements for the threshold of new builds for a 1/2 inch or existing at 3/4 inch. There was a debate on whether or not this was in compliance for ADA requirements because the door was not utilized for City Council, but rather City Council installed an ADA push button for that door, and that it goes to ADA public restrooms that City Hall provides for the public as public restrooms. There was also conversation from the city manager, Harold Stewart, as well as Luke Tillman, that it was maybe a punch list item. ADA requirements are required for occupancy to be met in order for the building to be occupied. Luke Tillema also said that he signed off on the occupancy after inspection. If it was that the sidewalk was not to be altered, which city manager had addressed, there are other options to meet that threshold of a 1:8 ratio or a 1:10 ratio so that it's sloped properly and meets ADA requirements. I spoke with Eric Hoffer at JLG Engineering, who engineered City Hall. He did say that the frames of the door were replaced, and that there were no modification requirements for the threshold. So I'm not sure if this is an engineering issue that may have been missed or why the requirements are not met. I was wondering if there was a conversation that was had after we had the meeting at the roundtable on issues impacting the disabled. I also addressed the door for the break room here at City Hall. City Manager Harold Stewart said that Luke Tillema said that it was too expensive to install. I addressed that battery-operated push buttons are an option, and that by looking at it, that perhaps it was just a drill or a fish tape that could be utilized, and best that it would have been installed in the design by the engineer or caught when construction was being done for it to not be such a cost after construction. When I asked, Harold Stewart also said that there were recommendations that were made for this door. I asked what the recommendations were, and he said that he did not remember. When I asked what the decision was, there was no response. Luke Telema also said during this meeting that he advocates for the disabled, that he is an advocate. My concerns are how it is that he's advocating when the inspections are being signed off on with ADA requirements not being met. I also am concerned about the $9,000 quote that he gave Jonathan Rosenthal for ADA push buttons to be installed on businesses that have already signed the contract for the facade program that did not install the ADA push buttons. I have a written quote from Thorsrud for less than $3,500 to install the ADA push buttons, equipment, and labor, which is under $3,500. All of these buildings would have power or electrical or they would have at least receptacles at the front of the facade where the windows are for any signage. So to bring extra, if they had to pull new wires or run raceway, what they would probably have to do is only pull wire, which would be a minimal cost for an electrician to come in and tie in the installation by Thorsrud for the doors.
I appreciate your comments. And if you could just briefly sum up your comments, please.
My concern is that ADA accessibility is not a focus by the city. Like safety, ADA accessibility is not just knowledge, but it's an attitude. You don't have a safe work environment unless you have people that have knowledge and the attitude to enforce it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I respond, Mr. Ross?
Carrie.
Thank you, Billy. I really do appreciate it. So, was probably like what? So one of the first things I did after I was elected, being the first openly disabled member of this body, I believe, was I quarterly convene this roundtable. It is a roundtable on issues impacting the disabled communities. I pull together people who are working with the developmentally and physically disabled people of our community. And it is an opportunity. My goal of it is to do exactly your aspiration, Billy, is that the city does better by that. And that is bringing usually department heads to meet with the roundtable to discuss issues. We've had the traffic engineer, we've had the city manager, we've had our city engineer, we've had our transit folks, we have had our public works folks come and talk about issues that their departments have, that not that they have, but that intersect with the disabled community and how to improve upon things there. So that is something that continues. That is where I met Billy. She came to the last meeting I convened a couple of weeks ago. Your email has not, I am meeting with the city engineer very soon to point by point go by some of this. This is exactly the things I want to do. Is there some things that we can hopefully check off very quickly, right? Like that side, like signage, right? Like that kind of thing. And, come up. I'm so glad you're engaged in helping, move us forward, because this is a monumental task. And hopefully when I leave this governing body, I will have made the community who are impacted by disabilities, a bit better in Minot, but by no means are we even close to where we should be. So I appreciate you cajoling and pushing and holding us and our community accountable for making this a community that is not just meeting standards, but exceeding that and for all of our community. So thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
Now is the time if there is anybody else who wishes to address the council. Anyone else? If not, we will move on to item number 9 on the agenda, that is miscellaneous and discussion items. Are there anything to be brought up?
Brian, could you introduce our newest employee? And could that employee come up with Mr. Billingsley? I mean, you may not be the newest employee, like, in the city, I'm not sure, but your newest employee.
Yes, I'd like to introduce the council to Doug Diedrichson. He is the new principal planner for the city of Minot. His first day of work was today. He's spent the last 3 or 4 years working as a planner for Ward County. And Doug, do you want to introduce yourself further?
Yeah, as Brian mentioned, I'm coming over from Ward County. My wife and I relocated here about 4 years ago. So I'm very excited for the opportunity. Look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you and welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Brian.
Is there anything else under item 9? If not, we'll move on to item number 10. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Paul,
Second.
second by Carrie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.